Hello and welcome to Todd Talk, where insight meets inspiration. I'm your host, Todd Hiller, and I'm an author, speaker, and longtime community leader, here to guide you on a journey towards fulfillment and balance. In every episode, we'll explore ways to fill life's emptiness, helping you uncover practical tools to create harmony, purpose, and happiness. Whether it's thriving in your career, nurturing personal growth, or simply finding joy in the everyday, Todd Talk is your space for real conversations and actionable advice. So let's thrive together, personally, professionally, and beyond. This is Todd Talk, and I'm thrilled to have you here.
Have you ever noticed that there are sayings that you grew up with, maybe your parents or your grandparents or your aunts or uncles or friends, whoever it was? They had sayings that really shaped us and sayings that we still remember today and that we grew up with. And I think a lot of this, or a lot of times, most people have these. And if you think about them, you can start to remember some of them. And some of them you might remember right off the bat. And there's a few that have stuck with me that my dad used to say. And they've stuck with me for a really long time. And we're going to talk about one of those today because I think if we try to dive into more than one, it's going to be a podcast that gets super long because there's so much to say. I actually did a video on TikTok a long time ago about one of the sayings my dad has and how long it took me to figure out what it actually meant and realizing what it actually meant, as a young adult and kind of using that to work it into my life as a whole. And it got some traction. I had some great comments about people who shared things they remembered and things their parents used to say. And just really it spurred some great conversation about the phrase itself. But we're not going to do that one today. We'll tease that one out. Maybe we'll do an episode about that one. But this is another thing that I grew up hearing my dad say, and even when we got, quote unquote, lectured by our parents, we didn't really get like lectures. We usually got lectures when we were in trouble, but we didn't get lectures. We got sayings. We got things that our parents that you can probably hear in your head, your parents saying all the time. And I think some phrases stick with us not because they were loud, but because they were consistent. And I know this one for sure that my dad used to say is one of those things. And it has been really impactful in my life. And it has brought me a lot of joy. And sometimes it even brought some kind of, not tears because I was upset about it, but really difficult moments in my life. I kind of used it to walk forward with. So the phrase is, tell them where you come from and show them what you're made of. And this was something my dad would say a lot. And usually it was when my brother and I were going out somewhere, whether we were going out to a sports game or a sports practice, or we were going out to hang out with friends or meet new people. And then it kind of morphed itself when I got into the fire department and I started going to classes in the fire department and I started learning the fire service and really expanding my knowledge that way. When I got voted as an officer for the first time way back when as a lieutenant, he said that phrase over. And even before that, when I went away to college, I remember him saying it when I was getting ready to leave, and kind of tears in his eyes. And my dad's a pretty tough dude. He doesn't really cry much, but I could tell, that feeling was right there. That sentiment was right up in the top of his throat. And it was, that moment right before you're completely choked up. And he gave me a hug and he said, don't you forget. He said, tell them where you come from, show them what you're made of. And it did some things for me. And specifically when I was going away to college, if you've been away to college or you've ever sent a kid off to college yourself, it's a pretty scary first leap sometimes. So sometimes it's, not necessarily the fear that creeps in, but kind of the doubt and the self-doubt and the unknown. And when I got thinking about it, my thoughts around it kind of went from, it's Dad saying, to really diving into it the older I got and thinking about what he meant. Tell them where you come from. Tell people literally where you come from. Tell them where you grew up, in what town or what state. When you go away to college, that's something everybody talks about where they're from. But, that's part of your identity, and it's part of what shaped you and how you grew up. But more than that, I think it's also tell them where you came from in the sense of what you've been through, who your parents are, who your family is, what your beliefs are, what you've gone through, what you've been through, what has shaped you. And the more I've adapted this in my life, it's a really great and powerful phrase to me for lots of reasons, because My parents are some of the most amazing people I have ever met in this world, and they are who shaped me, and that's where I came from. I came from a loving set of parents who did their best to raise me right and raise me correctly and teach me the important lessons in life, and not just the ones that I learned in school and learned from a book, but the ones that would keep me safe, the ones that would keep me honest and loyal and hardworking, and all those things. And, I come from a small town, so also, tell them where you come from. Do you have a long-standing family name that's prominent in the community where you are? Or maybe did you move across the world and end up someplace completely foreign? Tell people those things because they make up your identity. And a lot of times I think we try to hide from our identity because there's some things we're not proud of in our past, which is totally fine. Or maybe our family, our aunts and uncles or cousins or brothers or sisters, when we went through school or they went through school, they weren't the best students, and we try to avoid that. Or maybe they were great students and we're like, yeah, well, we're not going to live up to them. But it's important to tell people who you are because you are the person you need to be. You are the person the world needs. The world doesn't need people to just be all the same and carbon copies of each other. It's important who you are and where you came from, and the things that shaped you are what make you you. And a really beautiful friend of mine said to me one day, we were talking about, loss and how difficult it can be. And they said, yeah, it is very, very hard and difficult and sad, but I would not be the person I am today if I had not gone through and walked through what I have walked through. And it's so true, and it's so powerful, and it took me years and some life to understand what it was actually teaching me, this quote that I heard from my dad all the time. Because when I was a kid, it was just something Dad said. Yeah, okay, Dad, when you're a 16-year-old kid, tell them where you come from, show them what you're made of. Yeah, okay, I got it, Dad. But, as you get older, I think we realize that wisdom doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just rides along in repetition, and that's certainly what my dad's phrases did, and I don't know if he did it intentionally, but he probably did. I think he knew if he said it to us enough that we would actually start paying attention maybe and figure out what it meant. And I don't think I understood what it meant until life gave me the homework to kind of figure out what it was all about, And so your identity matters, your roots matter, your story matters, and the pride and the humility and the grounding that comes from naming your place and where you come from is really important. Because place shapes perspective for sure. I came from a really small town. When I started meeting people from giant cities and giant schools and places that I had never been, it was really eye-opening. But what it taught me was that where I was from mattered. My family structure, my community structure, what I had been through mattered, because not only did it give me good conversation to talk to people about, but it was also a really beautiful reminder that the world is so vastly different and we have so much to learn from other people, and we can learn by speaking and listening and talking and diving into conversations and getting to know other people and about other places. Because, where you're from isn't just a location, it's a lens. Your hometown doesn't necessarily define your limits. Sometimes it does, but it does explain your foundation. And I think the really important thing to think about with that is that your hometown shouldn't define your limits. And you should just let it explain your foundation. Because as someone from a small town, sometimes people from a small town, there's always that phrase, oh, they're never going to get out, They were born and raised there. They never go anywhere. They stay there forever. And yes, I moved back to the town I grew up in, but I have done some things in between. And I plan to continue doing things in between to make sure I get myself out of the small town community and out into the world as much as possible. But don't let your beliefs about yourself or where you came from limit you. I think that's a really important aside. Don't think that just because you're from a small town or just because you're from a low-income community or just because you're from, a certain side of the tracks, quote unquote, as it goes, or just because you're from this super remote place that nobody else is in. Don't let that limit you and make you think that that's all you're ever capable of being. And when we think about how that shaped us, how our upbringing shaped us and how our location, tell them where you come from. Although when Dad said it was always tell E-M apostrophe, right? Tell them where you come from. In that idea and in that description of where you come from, you get to do things like tell people, or not, don't tell them specifically, but wrapped in that comes ideas and things like, what did your parents model for you? What did you have to overcome early on as a kid? What did you overcome later on in life? What part of your story shaped how you show up today? And there's lots of things in our lives that sometimes we even overlook because we don't remember them or they happened a long time ago. But so many things have shaped who we are that are specific to where we came from, to our parents, to our hometown, to the household we grew up in. I was born and raised on a farm. Hard work was introduced to me as soon as I understood what words were and knew how to walk. There was no skirting around chores. My mom and dad needed help, and so my brother and I were there to help them. And it didn't limit me. It made me the person I am today. It gave me a work ethic that is so strong and so dedicated. It taught me to serve others and to serve even animals and to do a good job for the sake of doing a good job and not to quit at 3:30 just because the clock says it's 3:30, but quit when the work is finished and quit when you've accomplished what you need to accomplish. And God, if someone needs help, for the love of God, go running and help them. Don't just turn your back and say, well, let them figure it out. My work day is over or I have other things to do. All those things are a product of where I came from and where I was born and raised and grew up and where I learned about the world and where I learned to show up for other people and for myself and help my parents and help my brother and help our neighbors and all that kind of stuff. And, your story isn't baggage. Your story is context. I think sometimes we use that term a lot, right? Oh, well, this person's got a lot of baggage. Yeah, well, you know what? Baggage is context for the amazing person that you've become. And your quote-unquote baggage is context for all the things you've lived through and that you have persevered through and that you have had to carry that's super heavy like that emotional baggage, but you still found a way to set it down and move on. Because you don't owe people perfection, but you owe yourself honesty about where you came from. And then give that to other people because you are not being your genuine self if you just pretend you come from somewhere else or you pretend that you didn't live through a certain thing or you just try to hide it, because that's not being genuine. And even if it's difficult and even if it's something you wish didn't happen or you weren't proud of at the time, growing through it while you go through it is something that has turned you into the person you are today. And that road behind you, all the road behind you that you've walked so far and traveled so far, that explains the strength in your stride, so to speak, right? The road behind you shows what you have walked through, the hills, the valleys, the mountains, the rugged terrain, the places where the road disappeared and you had to kind of walk through the thick of it, through the underbrush and wipe the brambles away from your face and figure out where to go and what to do in life's hard moments. All that matters. And that shows who you are as a person. And right along with that, once you dive into that and tell people where you come from, then comes the part where you show them what you're made of. And that comes with a shift from identity to action and to character. And this is kind of like a words versus work thing, because the difference between declaring you have character and demonstrating you have character is something I think you will find very prevalent in this world. As you live your life, and if you're someone who has met and dealt with a lot of people, I'm sure you can pull instances about this, right to the forefront of your brain. The more people you meet, I promise, and I'm almost certain that everyone listening has met someone who has declared unequivocally that they have lots of character. I am a leader because I wrote leader on my button and I stuck it on my chest, or I'm a leader because I wear a big fancy hat and I'm in charge. But character doesn't come from the words and the descriptions. Character comes from the demonstration. Action will always outplace adjectives, so to speak. Oh, I like that, right? Action will always outplace adjectives. I have met people in this world who love to look important on paper. They want the accolades and the title and the letters after their name or the title after their name and the big white helmet in the fire service or the big flashy desk or the name badge. All those kinds of things. And they're nothing but a big, hollow, empty shirt or a big, hollow, empty suit of armor, full of nothing. There's no integrity inside. All they are is all the words they've drummed up to surround themselves with to make themselves sound important. And I have met other people who have no title at all, who have no need or desire to be named or called out or recognized for their actions, but they are some of the hardest working and the best and brightest people who can pull people together and lead a group and get down and dirty and just do the hard work for the sake of doing the hard work and never ever need reminders of what to do or never need reminders to keep going. They just perform and perform and perform and do it, and that is what character is. Character comes through demonstration, not because you wrote a whole bunch of fancy titles on the piece of paper or the name plaque on your desk. And so this is what my dad meant about show them what you're made of. You don't have to tell people, hey, I learned hard work growing up on the farm. Hey, my dad taught me how to work hard. We used to work a full-time job, and then by gosh, we used to work all day and all night on the weekends, and even after work, we used to work until 10 o'clock at night doing farm chores. Like, you don't have to give people a list with your words. But when it came to things I was asked to do, I would do a good job for the sake of doing a good job. I would work hard. Physically work hard. I've had a lot of jobs in my time that required manual labor. I could never sit around and do nothing. I could never just, schlep off and hide and try to avoid the work. I always had to do the work because that's what I was made of. I was made from the stuff that my dad and mom instilled in me, where you do a good job for the sake of doing a good job, and you work hard because that's what you owe to the job you're doing, and that's what you owe to yourself, to say that you're showing up the way you need to show up. And that brings about it brings about a type of character that people know they can rely on, and people know they can count on you for things. One of the reasons I got so far down the rabbit hole of over-serving people in my life is because, one, yes, I have a servant's heart, but two, people came to call on me because they knew I would show up and help them. And that's not a pat on my back. That's just a fact. I had a lady from the town hall call me one day and say, we don't know who else to call, but we know if we call you, you will do something to help us. And more importantly, you'll do everything in your power to figure out how to get us through the situation. And she wasn't wrong. And that's what I was made of. And that came from, we're going to tie this together, that came from being born and raised by my parents in the place I grew up, where we live in a small town where community is important and neighbors help neighbors. And my mom and dad were and still are both super, super hardworking and dedicated. And so, you don't tell people who you are, you live it. Character doesn't need a press release. It shows up when you show up for it. It's the product of you being who you are. And the loudest proof you can ever show of how strong your character is the consistency to show up and be there for other people. And, there's a person in my life I know who this comes out in them 200 times over again. Like, every single day I think about all the things they do for other people and all the things they are willing to do for the people in their lives. And it has always been so beautiful to me that they are willing to have that much, or that they do have that much energy and are willing to do that many things and that much for the people in their lives, and that they keep showing up consistently. And it just speaks volumes about who they are as a person. So yeah, the loudest proof is definitely the consistency of character you have by showing up for people. And when it comes to, tell them what you're made of, show them what you're made of. One of the other really important things about showing people is that when you do things with people and for people and right alongside people, you naturally build those relationships where people understand what you're actually about. If you only talk to someone on the surface, if you just have conversations with someone in passing, line at the coffee shop, on your way to class, on your way to work, whatever it is, you really don't know a whole lot about them. But you start working next to someone side by side, you start showing up for them and helping them with a task, or you start being there for them when they really need it because things are going sideways, or their kid always needs a ride to practice because they work 2 jobs and you're always there for them, or their kid needs a place to go before or after school and you're always there for them, or the church needs your help because they're running short on volunteers and you're always there to help. These are the kind of things that really teach people what you're all about. And it's really beautiful when it happens. And, when it comes to things like burnout and purpose and sustainable effort, this ties into this for sure. I talked about how I got so far down the rabbit hole of being burned out was over-serving and never saying no to anything. But the reason that happened was because I had done a really good job, apparently, of telling people that I would always be there for them, or showing people that was someone they could count on. And so I still am that person. I have not dialed that back. I will not. It's not in me. I will always have a servant's heart. I will always give and do things for other people, for the community, for my family, for the people I know and my friends. Always, always, always. I love to do it. It makes me happy to do it. But one of the things you need to be careful of when you do that is that burnout can creep in if you're not careful about how you do that and how you show up for yourself as well, right? It has to be a sustainable effort. And, that's one of the things I speak about, and one of the things I coach about is making sure that you are living with this under this big umbrella of personal wellness, or what I call personal wellness, to allow you to understand how to be the best version of yourself that has the time and the energy and the effort to show up for other people. And you can do all that. You can make sure you are checking in with yourself and not being overcommitted and burned out. And when you do that, you can still have pride in your craftsmanship. You can still have pride in your service and your follow through the people. And it's super possible, I promise. I'm a living, breathing example of it right now. I went from severely burned out and worn out and not being able to get out of my own way when it came to over-serving, and I was just so depleted and had no energy and no interest in so many things, to living a life now of fulfillment and sustainable energy where I love helping other people, and I have found the ways to give back that I can sustain and that I am willing to do and happy to do, and that do a great amount of good for not only myself and my own personal wellness and well-being and the joy I get from serving other people, but also for the people I'm showing up for. And we've heard this a lot, right? Getting up one more time when you fall down is kind of a quiet form of courage. There's a famous video speech by Denzel Washington that says, get knocked down, fall down 9 times or fall down 8 times. Yep, we're going to try this one more time. Get knocked down 7 times, get up 8, And that's what it's all about. It's about making sure that you have the integrity to get back up and to walk through those things. And that's something else that we don't give ourselves enough credit for. A lot of times we don't look at how many things go correctly during our day. We kind of focus on the things that went poorly, and we get wrapped up in them and forget about all the things that went right during the day. So, okay, as we kind of wrap this up and conclude, why this still matters in my life today, right? Tell them where you come from, show them what you're made of. It still guides me in my decisions. This applies in work, in my relationships with other people that I meet. It shows up in parenting. It shows up in leadership and my leadership roles in the community. It shows up all the time in my life. It is not just a passing phrase that my dad used when I was a kid. It has stuck with me, and it keeps sticking with me. So as we wind this down, I want to ask you, what phrases did you grow up hearing? And ask yourself, what were they trying to teach you? And then ask yourself, are you living it or just remembering it? If there was something really important to you, something that mattered a lot to you, do you do a good job to live it in your life right now? And that's something that you can work on if you want to. And it's really beautiful because it comes full circle. If it's something from your childhood that you can come full circle to now, man, that's really, really cool. Because, I think we don't overgrow the lessons we learn as kids. We either embody them or we forget them. And we won't remember everything. That's just the nature of being people. But the sayings that shaped you are still shaping you, whether you realize it or not. These things that my dad said to me, I still think about all the time. And I still put them into practice in my everyday life. So when you meet new people, or when you go and do new things, or you form new relationships, I encourage you to tell them where you come from and show them what you're made of. Because your story matters. Show them what you're made of, because your actions carry the proof, right? Show them how good of a job you can do. Show them how helpful you can be. Show them that you are a person who is willing to show up and do the hard work and the hard things. If you want to share a saying with me that shaped you, send it to me. Email me, message me on social media. I would love to hear it. And I think maybe a future episode we might do is going to be about one of the other sayings my dad had as a kid that has really shaped me and helped me become the person I am, and more specifically, be the type of person who knows how to pull joy out of just about any situation. So we're going to talk about that maybe. Maybe we'll do an episode about that. In the meantime, if you have enjoyed this and it's been helpful, thank you so much for listening, and please share it with someone you might think might find it helpful also. Come along for the ride with me. Click follow, click subscribe, download the episode, whatever you want to do, and come follow me on social media, TikTok and Instagram. I am at Todd W. Hiller, same screen name, no spaces, no underscores, no number. I appreciate you guys being here so much to listen and follow along with me on this journey. I cannot tell you how much it means to me. Thank you very, very much, and have a fantastic rest of your day. I hope you've enjoyed the message. Thanks for tuning in to Todd Talk. If you've liked what you've heard, please go ahead and subscribe and follow along so you don't miss any updates or new episodes. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.